Just count the ways. How many ways is Justin Trudeau's government screwing up? Basic services that Canadians pay very high taxes for, well, they elude us. It doesn't matter if it's passports, it's the ArriveCAN app, it's COVID, it's the economy, it's energy independence, it's everything. I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Jamil, Jivani, and Brian Lilley. Okay, Jamil, I know I just sort of listed just a handful of things, and I know we are quite critical of the current Trudeau NDP government. But am I wrong to suggest that they are failing Canadians on pretty much every area of public policy?
No, you're not wrong, Adrian. I think what's happened here is that Canadians are willing to tolerate a certain style from Justin Trudeau and his government in terms of the lecturing to us and the way they're always moralizing and pandering, as long as they were competent, as long as they were delivering the basic services that we expect from our federal government. And that's what they've lost. They've lost that confidence from the public that they can organize things like air travel, that they can deliver on promises made to our Afghan partners, that they can make good on the reputation they've created of being a high level G7 country that can manage the basic expectations of the population.
Brian, I know that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, whose approval ratings are, I mean, to say they're low would be an understatement. The
Yeah.
Republicans are expecting a big sweep come the midterms in November. But I bring up the president of the United States because a lot of what we see with Biden is similar to what we see with Trudeau. It's sort of, you haphazardly going along. Now, Trudeau's been in office a lot longer than Biden has been in terms of being the head of a country, but it's similar. You see recession, and the U.S. entering recession. You see this obsession with green energy and green policy. You see sky high inflation, sky high interest rates, all that happening in the U.S. Similar to happening in Canada. They're trying to redefine the what a recession means in the United States. We're going to hear similar language in Canada, and I know all of these things are very negative. So let's just pivot for one moment where you actually believe there's one area where
Yeah.
they have succeeded. What is that?
Well, they stopped screwing up what they were doing last year. I mean, last year it was very hard on them because one of the main jobs of the prime minister is to manage the relationship with the White House. And Justin Trudeau seriously failed on that when we ended up in a situation where the Biden administration, they're supposed to be our friends. Canadians love Democrats. And Joe Biden ended up bringing out a protectionist policy that was worse than anything Donald Trump had put forward. Who predicted that? Oh, well, I mean, I did, and anyone paying attention, but it brought out this electric vehicle policy that was going to be hugely detrimental to our auto industry, and Trudeau is left asleep at the switch. So I blasted him last fall. I had to give him credit this week because, yeah, the Canadian effort, and it was a Team Canada effort, the federal government, industry, province of Ontario mainly, going down and getting results so that we're not going to be left out and left with our auto plant shutting down. Let me make this promise to Justin Trudeau's PMO right now. If he stops screwing up the passports, the airports, the ArriveCAN app, if he ends the fertilizer ban, or this push to reduce fertilizer use by 30%, I will praise him as well. Do what I say, Justin, and I'll give you kudos because they don't accept criticism very often. They bristle at it and they claim that what you're talking about isn't real. You see Omar Al-Gabra going around touring empty airports as if nobody's there. Is he going at 3 a.m. when he posts these videos of him strolling through Pearson or Vancouver with officials and there's nobody there in stupidly long lineups? Start getting those basic services right and giving Canadians what they expect. I'll give you credit, guys. Jamil's right. We want competence. I don't like his style, even when he is competent, but we at least want some competence, and we're not getting it.
I'm just going to add that even in a week where Brian's right, Trudeau should be racking up a win in terms of the relationship with the White House. We also see the US government expressing concerns about his censorship agenda and what it will mean for American big tech firms. So he can't even get a win when he wants one. His ideas are still alienating the White House, still alienating our international trade partners, because he's just going with extreme legislation that is beyond the scope of anything other countries have looked at.
Now, we know that our current prime minister is, to be charitable, not a deep thinker when it comes to a lot of these issues. And so many things that face Canadians every day when they leave their home, everything that Canadians touch when it comes to shopping, groceries, filling up your gas tank. These are trivial things that the prime minister isn't fussed by, and he doesn't understand it. And I'm not begrudging him for growing up with a silver spoon. I mean, I'm not gonna go down that road. But it doesn't, like, Trudeau one aside, no one in his cabinet, Jamil, to me, it seems, is empathetic, understanding, appreciative of the realities that Canadians are facing in real time in their own households every day. There's no, it's like they're missing this chip. And I know that everyone, oh, liberals are far more compassionate than those, mean conservatives. But never in all the time I've been covering politics have I seen a federal government that is just so absent and so out of touch. Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, they too were of means before they became prime minister. But there was a human touch that at least they had, and were understanding or compassionate Canadians. I don't see that with the Trudeau government.
You're absolutely right. There's this bizarre defensiveness they have, that any expectation on behalf of the Canadian people that things could be better is somehow should be dismissed because they're being somehow ungrateful. They really do seem to see themselves as enlightened leaders that the rest of us should be respecting, and moving aside from any sort of disagreement or debate on really important issues. We've seen how they try to jam through legislation that deserves conversation. They just think they're above everyone else, and it's a really uncomfortable thing during a time of inflation, because we're literally seeing economic inequality affect people in ways we haven't seen in decades, and we have a government that seems to think we shouldn't be upset about that we should just keep our mouths shut, let it happen, feel our pockets get tighter, see our bank accounts empty, see the price of things that we poured our savings into decline, and we're supposed to be comfortable with that. It's very, very bizarre. And to your point about compassion, Adrienne, like, this is one thing I've been trying to say to people. It is not compassionate to run an economy that makes it harder for working men and women to provide for their families. That is what inflation has done. So all the ways they like to virtue signal and show they care about the average person just goes completely out the window if the way that they're running the economy makes it harder for us to just purchase basic things for our families. That's not compassion. And I think that's part of how we need to evaluate what compassion from government officials and politicians looks like. Do you actually make life easier for people or not? Regardless of how many apologies you make or how many things you might say that make people feel good about themselves, if we can't pay the bills easily, I mean, how much is that worth at the end of the day?
And trust is such a significant issue, Brian. I mean, the whole notion, oh, you can't trust anything a politician says, is taken to a next level with the Trudeau government. I mean, we can list the number of scandals they've had. When it comes to the We scandal, when it comes to a lab scam, or just basic transparency in government. I mean, if certain things and actions that the Trudeau Liberals have taken, if Prime Minister Harper had done that, I mean, there would be, screaming and yelling in the streets that he's a dictator, and he's trying to squelch our freedom of speech and our liberties. But when it comes to Trudeau, the example I want to go on is just this week, where our public safety minister, Bill Blair, had to provide testimony about what happened with the RCMP in that investigation in the shooting in Nova Scotia. So we have all of this happening under this guise that this is, a friendly, sunny ways type of government. But Blair provided that testimony, but is contradicting what the actual officers are saying. So trust is an issue.
trust has been an issue with Bill Blair for a long time. Remember, he was the police chief in charge of the response at the G20 here in Toronto. I was there for that. I watched the cars burn in the street. I watched the riots happen. And then I watched the police overreaction where they went from not arresting anyone that was rampaging through the streets to arresting everyone. Why? Because they could. Because Bill Blair is not a trustworthy individual. He's a man who, to use the parliamentary terms, as they did in a column earlier this week, he's economical with the truth. Or one of my favorites from Parliament, they say, it seems the member is unfamiliar with the 8th commandment, the one that says, don't lie. So, this is Bill Blair in a nutshell. And now he's going around and says Marco Mendicino with this gun buyback program that was launched just after the Portapique shooting in Nova Scotia, saying that these are weapons of war. They never have been, they never will be. The rifles that they're banning are not weapons of war, and any army that tried to use them would be defeated pretty quickly. So these guys can't be trusted. But remember, one of the Trudeau sayings, going back to what Jamil was saying about how they're reluctant to take criticism, one of their sayings is better is always possible, except apparently when the Trudeau government is screwing up, which is pretty much all the time. So these guys, they have these sayings, they have these virtue signals, they have the appeal to your emotions that we're so great, we're so caring. And then when they're not, well, they get nasty, they get angry, and they will outright lie to you. While I was about to use a phrase that I don't think we can, but it involves telling you it's raining when something else is happening on your leg.
We can sort of look at what happened with Tamara Lich, who was one of the organizers of the Freedom Convoy. We've seen how she's been treated through the justice system. Jamil, we were talking the other day that people who have repeated gun crimes have been treated better than Tamara Lich did for deigning to question this federal government's mandates. And so, you have an unequal application of the law for anybody that opposes how the Trudeau government is behaving or acting. But I don't want to relitigate all that. It just goes to show that if you deign to question them, the Truanons come after you. They're going to come after the three of us, to be sure. But the question I think I want to end with is, we have all these problems, we have all these issues, we have all these frustrations, and we're on, struggling with inflation and potentially more interest rate hikes, which is going to keep people, struggling to afford their homes and their groceries and their gas and all the things. Is there an election on the horizon, Jamil? Is the NDP going to screw up any courage at all to forget this weird deal they have with the Liberals and do anything about it?
Well, I do think the NDP probably has some buyer's remorse coming out of that deal, because they probably overestimated how popular and strong the Trudeau Liberals would be at this point. I don't think Jagmeet Singh understood just how weak Trudeau was coming out of that last election, where he won by the smallest amount of the popular vote of any prime minister in decades. So I think Jagmeet Singh made a miscalculation with the deal, probably regrets it. Does he have the courage to get out of it now and actually challenge the Liberal government the way that the so-called left is supposed to challenge people in power? I don't think so. I think we've seen no indication that Jagmeet Singh has any courage at all, quite honestly, since he became the leader of the NDP. So I don't expect an election. I also think the Trudeau Liberals would be making a huge mistake going into election right now. They might look at it and say, well, we don't want to give the new Conservative leader time to get adjusted to his or her new role. And that might make some sense for a reason to call an election. But they're so weak right now. They're already on their back foot. They're playing defense. They look disorganized. The country doesn't look very strong at the moment. And I just can't imagine wanting to go into an election with that mentality. That said, he did spend millions of dollars on an election last fall that basically got him the same results as 2 years earlier. So it's hard to predict what the value calculation for Justin Trudeau will look like. I just don't think he's going to want to put his name on a ballot right now.
Brian Lilley, last word.
I only think he'll go if he has what Lucien Bouchard used to call the winning conditions. So if he thinks that the deal with the NDP is worth blowing up, if he thinks that he can scare middle of the road, suburban moms that Pierre Poilievre, assuming he wins the Conservative leadership, that Pierre Poilievre is the Antichrist, that he's got to protect them from, that if you don't vote for the Liberals, that this guy will ruin the country. If he thinks he can do that and he sees the winning conditions, then he might go. It's still speculative at this point, but it always is until they pull the plug. They have talked about dates in November. How serious they are, we just don't know.
Even for you true-anons out there, you just have to ask yourself, what is going right with this government? Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.